When she first stepped onto my porch, I thought she was just another traveler caught by the heat. Then I saw the bruises. The late summer sun was still hanging low over the pines, turning the dust in the yard to gold. I just set the kettle back on the stove when I heard the soft scrape of boots on my steps. Too light for a man, too hesitant to be trouble. I wiped my hands on a cloth and opened the door, expecting a ranch hand, maybe a peddler's boy. Instead, there she was. A young woman stood on my porch, shoulders hunched as if she could fold herself small enough to disappear. Her dress, once blue maybe, was faded to a tired gray, travel-stained and torn along one sleeve. Dust clung to her boots, to the hem of her skirt, even to the loose strands of hair that had fallen from the knot at the back of her head. But it was her face that made my hand stop on the doorframe. A dark bruise bloomed across her cheekbone, yellow at the edges, purple and angry near the center. Another curved along her jaw like a thumbprint that had sunk too deep. Someone had hit her, and not gently. More than once. "Water," she said, voice dry as old paper. "Please, just a little water." Her fingers gripped the porch post so hard the knuckles had gone white. I could see a tremor in her arms, in the way her knees fought to lock and hold. She was balanced somewhere between standing and collapsing, like a tree with its roots half-torn. I didn't answer at first. Out here, 10 miles from town, a stranger at your door was never just a stranger. Could be trouble following behind. Could be bait. Could be someone's problem they were hoping I'd take off their hands. But her eyes were what made my chest tighten. They were a pale, washed-out hazel, rimmed red from either crying or dust or both. There was fear in them, yes, the jumpy kind that watched every movement like it might turn dangerous in a blink. But beneath that, there was something else. A kind of tired that went all the way down. I stepped aside, nodding toward the chair on the porch. "Sit before you fall," I said. "I'll get your water." "I won't come inside," she blurted as if I'd asked. Porch is fine. I'll drink and go. Don't want to be any trouble." "You're about 3 breaths from the ground," I replied. "That's trouble already." Her lips twitched, like they wanted to remember how to smile and couldn't quite manage it. She eased herself into the chair, hissing in pain as she bent. That's when I saw the way she held her ribs, one arm unconsciously wrapping around her side like she was trying to hold herself together. Whoever had done this hadn't stopped at her face. Inside, I filled a tin cup from the water barrel, then thought better of it and added another. When I stepped back out, she had her eyes closed, head tipped back against the wall, as if just being off her feet had stolen the last bit of strength she had left. "Here," I said softly. Her eyes opened and darted to my hands first, then my face, like she was checking both for danger. Satisfied or maybe just out of options. She took the cup with both hands. They were shaking so badly the water nearly spilled. She drank like someone who wasn't sure when she'd see water again. Slow, careful gulps at first, then a little faster when her body realized it was allowed to want something. She finished the cup, then the second, only stopping when she caught me watching and seemed embarrassed by how thirsty she was. "Thank you," she murmured, setting the empty cup carefully on the porch boards, as if it were something precious. "I'll be on my way." "Where to?" I asked. She hesitated. That was answer enough. "Look," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "You walked 7, maybe 8 miles from town by the look of you. Sun's dropping. Coyotes will start singing before long, and there's a cat been moving through the ridge that ain't scared of much. You plan on wrestling all that with bruised ribs and half your strength gone." Her jaw tightened. There was pride there, battered but not dead. "I've made it this far." "Barely," I countered. "You're standing because that post is kind enough to hold you up." She looked away, out past the yard to where the pines grew thick and dark on the slope. Wind stirred the branches, carrying the first hint of evening chill. For a moment, she seemed to waver, and I watched the argument play out across her face. Depend on no one. Stay alive. Don't trust a stranger. You won't make it alone. Like I said, she whispered finally, almost to herself, I don't want to be trouble. My father's voice surfaced in my memory, rough and steady. A man doesn't get to choose when need shows up at his door, only how he answers it. You're not trouble, I said. You're hurt. There's a difference. She swallowed, and I saw her throat work around the words she didn't quite know how to say. Up close, I could see now that her lip had been split recently, still a thin line of red along the healing cut. There was a small rip in her sleeve near the shoulder, the fabric crusted brown where blood had dried. Did someone do this to you? I asked quietly. The question landed between us like a stone in still water. Her fingers tightened on the arm of the chair. For a heartbeat I thought she'd lie. But then something in her posture shifted, shoulders sagging, chin dipping, as if the fight had finally drained out of her. Yes, she said, just that one word. But it carried the weight of a long story. You running from them? I asked. She drew a shaky breath. I thought I was. But they don't like letting go of things they think they own. The word own made something go cold in my gut. I pushed the door open wider. I've got stew on the stove and a spare bed in the back room. You can rest, eat, and in the morning we'll figure out what comes next. Her head snapped up. No, she said quickly, panic flaring in her eyes. I can't stay. If they come looking and find me here, they'll... She cut herself off, but I could guess the ending. They'd what? I asked, voice level. Her gaze met mine, and for the first time there was a spark of anger in it, faint but real. They'd hurt you too, she said. They always do, whoever tries to help. I held that fear for a moment, let it settle in my chest alongside my own thoughts. The safe thing, the quiet thing, would be to send her on. Give her a full canteen, maybe some bread, point her toward the old river path and pretend I hadn't seen the bruises. I wasn't built for the quiet thing. Well, I said, then they'll have a problem. She stared at me like she wasn't sure she'd heard right, like nobody had ever said that about her before. You asked me for water, I went on. I'm giving you more than that. You can argue about it if you want, or you can let me help. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the slow creak of the porch in the cooling air. A bird called from somewhere in the pines, sharp and distant. She looked at the yard, the sky, the road she just walked, and finally back at me. And if they come? She whispered. I held her gaze, steady and unhurried. If they come, I said, they're the ones who should be worried, not you. Something in her expression cracked at that, like ice giving way in spring. Her eyes shone suddenly, tears she tried to blink back. You don't even know my name, she said, voice trembling. Then tell me, I replied. You can do it from inside, with a bowl of stew in your hands instead of your knees shaking out here. For a long second, she didn't move. Then, with the care of someone twice her age, she pushed herself up from the chair. She swayed, and I reached out a hand without thinking. She flinched at the movement, instinctive and sharp, then forced herself to still. I let my hand hover, waiting for her choice. Slowly, she placed her fingers in mine. Her hand was small, cold despite the heat of the day, and shaking just enough that I could feel it. My name is Lily, she said, and they're not going to be happy I got this far. I tightened my grip just enough to be sure she wouldn't fall. Lily, I said, you made it to my porch. That's as far as they're going to get. And with that, the bruised stranger who only wanted a drink of water stepped over the threshold, and I knew, deep in the place a man doesn't lie to himself, that trouble had found my door after all. But I had no intention of letting it take her back. Lily didn't step far, just past the doorway, before her legs nearly gave out. I caught her elbow gently, guiding her toward the chair by the small kitchen table. She lowered herself into it with the careful precision of someone trying not to show how much pain she was in. Even in the dim lamplight, The bruises along her arms looked worse than I'd realized on the porch. Some were days old. Some were fresh. None of them belonged on anyone, least of all someone who couldn't even bring herself to look me fully in the eyes. The silence settled between us like dust. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with things she wasn't ready to say and things I wasn't going to push for. I ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of her. She stared at it first, hands hovering inches above the table, unsure, like she expected me to pull it away, or like she didn't quite believe it was for her. "You can eat," I said softly. She blinked as if awakening from someplace far away. Then she picked up the spoon with trembling fingers and took a small bite. Her eyes closed, not in pleasure exactly, but in something closer to relief. She ate slowly at first, then faster, until she forced herself to stop and breathe. "You don't have to ration it," I murmured. "There's more on the stove." She swallowed, cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Sorry," she whispered. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. I didn't want to stop. She halted herself, jaw tightening. I didn't ask her to finish. Whatever story lived behind the bruises would come when she was ready. Or maybe never. Either way, she'd earned her silence. After a moment, she glanced around the cabin. The shelves lined with jars, the stacked wood by the stove, the old rifle hanging above the mantel. Her gaze softened slightly, almost wistful. "It's quiet here," she said. "That's why I live here. Peace must feel nice. Most days." I watched her carefully. "You can stay until you're strong enough to walk without wincing. After that, we'll decide what to do." Her spoon paused mid-air. Yes, I said I'd help you." She looked down quickly, hiding her face. "People don't usually keep their promises once they see what trouble I bring." "You're not trouble," I repeated, firmer this time. "A person running for their life isn't trouble. The ones chasing them are." The words hit her harder than I expected. Her mouth wobbled before she steadied it. "If they come," she whispered, voice thin as thread, "they'll hurt whoever is near me. They always do. They've done worse. They won't get near you here. You can't promise that." "I can," I said calmly, "because I know these woods better than any man alive, and because I don't scare easy." She stared at me for a long, trembling moment, as if testing the truth of what I'd said. And for the first time since she stepped onto my porch, she let her shoulders drop. Just a little. Lily didn't trust me yet, but she wanted to. That was enough. That night, the winter wind pressed against the cabin walls like a living thing, rattling the shutters and slipping through every gap it could find. I added another log to the fire, letting the warmth spill into the room, while Lily sat wrapped in the old wool blanket I'd given her. She held it tight around her shoulders, as if afraid someone might tear it away. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the door, not because she expected someone to knock, but because she feared someone wouldn't bother knocking at all. "Do you want the cot by the fire?" I asked quietly. "It's warmer than the back room." She hesitated, fingers tightening around the blanket's edge. "Is that okay?" "Yes." She nodded but didn't move. She seemed rooted to the chair, caught between fear of disturbing me and fear of being too far away. Only when the fire popped loudly did she startle enough to shift closer. When she settled onto the cot, she winced sharply. I saw her hand drift to her ribs again, and this time I didn't pretend not to notice. "Pain bad?" She nodded once. "It's always worse at night." I crouched down beside her, leaving distance, letting her decide if she wanted help. "I've got salve for bruising. It'll cut the ache." Her breath caught. A flicker of panic flashed across her face. Not at me, but at the idea of being touched. I raised both hands slightly. "I don't have to put it on. I can leave it here for you." Relief washed over her. "Thank you," she whispered. I set the small tin beside her pillow. She stared at it long after I'd stepped away, like she couldn't quite believe someone would offer help without taking something in return. After a long stretch of silence, Lily finally spoke. "I wasn't always like this, scared of everything," she murmured, watching the fire. "I used to think I could survive anything." "You did survive," I said. She shook her head. "Barely. When people hurt you long enough, you start thinking maybe you deserve it. You don't." Her eyes lifted to mine, unsure, fragile. "How do you know?" "Because no one deserves that," I said simply. "And because I've seen the kind of strength it takes to walk up a mountain in the dead of winter, alone, starving, with nothing but hope that someone won't slam the door in your face." Her breath trembled. She turned her head so her hair fell like a curtain, hiding her expression. But she didn't hide her voice. "It wasn't hope," she whispered. "It was desperation." "Sometimes," I said, "those are the same thing." Her eyes glistened in the firelight. She wiped them quickly, as if ashamed of being seen. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. "You aren't. You don't know my story. You don't have to tell it tonight." Something softened in her posture. Not trust, not yet, but the smallest shift toward it. She curled into the blanket, exhaustion tugging at her eyelids. "You'll sleep," I said gently. "And when you wake, you'll still be safe." Her lashes fluttered. "No one's ever said that to me." "Well," I murmured, pulling another blanket over her. "Someone should have." And for the first time since she arrived, she let sleep take her. Lily woke before dawn, the faint gray light slipping through the shutters like a shy visitor. For a moment she lay still, unsure of where she was, her breath quick and shallow the way animals breathe when they expect pain. Then her gaze landed on the fire, still burning, still tended, and the memory of last night slowly returned to her. She wasn't in the alley. She wasn't on the road. She wasn't being dragged back. She was safe, at least for now. I was outside chopping wood when she stepped quietly to the doorframe. She didn't cross it. She simply stood there, wrapped in the blanket, watching as the axe rose and fell. She flinched slightly at each sharp crack of splitting timber, but she didn't back away. It struck me then that fear was stitched into her bones, something she carried like a childhood scar. "You hungry?" I asked without turning, sensing her there. There was a long pause before she answered. "Yes, but I don't want to trouble you." I set the axe aside and wiped my hands on my coat. "If you were trouble, you'd know it. Come inside. I've got biscuits warming." She followed slowly, steps featherlight, as if afraid her footprints might inconvenience the floor. When she sat at the table, she kept her hands folded tightly in her lap until I pushed a plate toward her. Only then did she pick up a biscuit, breaking it into small bites, eating with careful restraint, as if she were rationing hope instead of food. "You can eat as much as you want," I told her. Her eyes flicked up briefly. "I don't want to take more than I should." "Then take what you need," I said. "That's all that matters." Something in her expression shifted. Not trust, not comfort, but a flicker of disbelief that such a rule could exist. After breakfast, she helped me clean the table. She moved slowly, wincing each time her ribs protested. I noticed her bracing one hand against the chair to stay upright, trying hard not to let me see how badly she hurt. "You don't have to work," I said gently. She froze. "I have to earn my keep. This isn't a transaction." "Isn't it?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "It always is. Everywhere I've been." I stepped back, giving her space, letting the silence settle like falling snow. "You're not a debt," I said quietly. "You don't owe me anything." She looked away, but not before I saw the crack in her armor. The disbelief, the confusion, the faint, trembling hope. Later, while I checked the snares, she sat by the fire, turning the tin of salve over in her hands. When I returned, she startled again, but this time she didn't shrink back. She set the tin down and took a slow breath. "Can you?" Show me how to use it properly? She asked. I didn't touch her. I kept a careful distance, demonstrating on my own forearm. She watched every movement, her brow furrowed in concentration, as if learning kindness required more effort than learning pain. Thank you, she murmured, but her hands trembled when she reached for the tin. And I knew, without her saying a word, that she wasn't trembling from pain. She was trembling from the unfamiliarity of gentleness. Snow drifted steadily from the sky that afternoon, soft flakes swirling like whispers around the cabin. Lily sat by the window wrapped in my old coat, her knees pulled up as she watched the world outside disappear beneath white silence. It wasn't fear in her eyes this time, just exhaustion, the deep kind that comes from running too long and hoping too little. I was mending a trap near the hearth when she finally spoke. Do you ever wonder what people think of you? The question was small, fragile, and it surprised me. Sometimes, I said, not often enough to change anything. She let out a breath that trembled. I used to care too much. Every glance, every whisper. I thought if I could just be better, quieter, more useful, maybe they'd stop looking at me like I didn't belong. I looked over. Did it work? Her eyes stayed on the window. No. They always found something else to hate. She brushed her fingers across her left cheek, where the faint line of an old scar hid beneath her hair. I hadn't asked about it, and I wouldn't, but she touched it like someone revisiting a nightmare. You didn't deserve any of that, I said quietly. She hesitated, then shook her head. You say that like you're sure. I am. She turned to face me then, really face me, as if searching for cracks in my certainty. How? You don't know my past. I don't need your past, I replied. I can see what you survived. Her breath caught, silent, sharp. No one had ever framed her scars as proof of strength instead of weakness. I saw the idea settle into her like something warm placed into cold hands. Later, while I prepared supper, she moved around the cabin more freely, touching the shelves, the wooden beams, the stone wall as if trying to memorize the shape of safety. She stopped at the table, fingers brushing the grain of the wood. Does anyone else come here? She asked. No, I said. Haven't had a visitor in years. And you're okay with me being here? Her voice carried the weight of abandonment, the fear that kindness always had an expiration date. I set the ladle down and met her gaze. If I wasn't okay with it, you wouldn't be here. She swallowed, nodding slowly, as if letting the truth in piece by piece. When we ate, she took seconds without apologizing. It was a small thing, so small most people wouldn't notice, but I did. Survival had taught her to take crumbs. Here she was learning she could take more. After dinner, her exhaustion caught up with her. She moved toward the cot, then paused. Is it all right if I leave the lamp on? Of course. She settled in, pulling the blanket to her chin. I kept my distance, giving her space, but I watched the way her eyelids lowered more gently tonight, the tension easing like a thaw. Before sleep claimed her, she whispered into the quiet cabin, "Thank you for not asking me to disappear." "You're not disappearing," I said softly. "You're recovering." And for the first time, she didn't flinch at the word, you. Morning arrived with a thin ribbon of sunlight slipping across the cabin floor, warm and gold against the cold wooden boards. Lily woke slowly, blinking as if the world she saw might vanish if she moved too fast. For a moment, she looked unsure of where she was, but when her eyes found mine tending the fire, something in her shoulders softened. She remembered she was safe. I handed her a tin cup of warm broth. "Try to drink a little more today." She took it, fingers brushing mine for barely a heartbeat. "I slept," she said quietly, like it was something impossible. "All night, I slept." "That's what happens," I said, "when no one's chasing you." The words landed deeper than I expected. She stared into the steam rising from her cup, her reflection trembling in the surface. "You say that like it's simple," she whispered. But even when I'm alone, I still feel them behind me. The men who hurt me, the people who hated me, the life that never felt like mine. I sat across from her. You're not alone now, and your life doesn't belong to anyone else anymore. Her breath shook. Why are you being like this with me? You don't even know if I deserve it. I leaned forward slightly. Kindness isn't something you earn, Lily. It's something you need. And needing it doesn't make you unworthy. She pressed her lips together, eyes glistening. No dramatic tears. Just that quiet, devastating kind of emotion that feels like a dam cracking from the inside. Can I stay? She asked finally, voice barely a thread. Not forever. Just until I can figure out who I am again. I didn't hesitate. Stay as long as you want. Her exhale shook like she'd been holding it for days. She set the empty cup aside and stood slowly, testing her weight as if each step carried a question. Am I allowed to exist here? To take up space? To breathe without permission? When she crossed the room toward the open door, sunlight spilled over her face. Her scars, faint but visible, glimmered softly. Not marks of shame anymore, but proofs of endurance. She touched the doorframe, grounding herself. It's beautiful out there, she murmured. It is, I said, and you're safe to walk in it. She turned, studying me with a new steadiness. You talk like you expect me to heal. I do, I said simply. And if I don't, then I'll help you try again tomorrow. The words stilled something inside her. She stepped outside, breathing in the pine-heavy air, and for the first time, she didn't look over her shoulder. Not once. As she stood there, quiet, fragile, but unbroken, I realized something. I hadn't rescued her. I had witnessed her rescue herself. All I had done was open a door she'd been locked behind for far too long. When she finally turned back toward the cabin, sunlight behind her like a halo, she said softly, Maybe I can start over here. You already have, I replied, and in the cold morning light, her expression carried the smallest, bravest hint of something I hadn't seen on her face before, hope.